Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Woo, that's loud. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is quite a speedy session. So if you feel like we're rapping a little bit, that's why. But we would love to talk to you about getting your campaign signed off. If you're marketers, I'm sure at some point you've come up with a beautiful, amazing campaign, you've had all the details right, and then somebody sees it and it's like, not posting that, not doing that, something's wrong with it. 300 opinions later, you don't even know what you're putting out there anymore. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen and that you get your amazing work signed off and you get it out into the world. And with us today, we have two lovely guests. By the way, Emma and I are co-hosts on Blame It on Marketing. That's how we know each other. We're your hosts. And our two lovely guests are Robyn and Michelle. Robyn, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you very much. So hello everyone, it's lovely to be here. So my name is Robyn Hartley. I am founder of Paperkite Media. So I help support B2B businesses with influencer strategy, employee thought leadership and customer advocacy, ultimately with the aim of building trust with buyers more effectively. And I will pass it over to you, Michelle, to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you very much. Everyone can hear me now. I'm Michelle Boland. I've been in marketing for 20 years, mostly in the last 15 years, mostly senior positions. I'm now a fractional CMO, and I have core depth areas of strategy, brand, and CX. So looking forward to the discussion.
Well, so you are in very safe hands, everybody. We are going to start off by talking through some of the horror stories and some of the awful things that you should try to avoid when trying to get your campaign signed off. I'm going to tell a very quick story, and then I'm going to hand over to our panelists who are going to share their advice. But essentially, what my ex-colleague's here, she's going to love this. We once tried to run a campaign that was very timely because it was connected to a specific product launch that we had. And we had a piece of content that needed to come out on a specific day. And about 2 days before the content was due to go live, our CEO gets me on the phone and goes through every single line and word of the piece of research / ebook that we were about to launch. And as a result, we had to do a complete rewrite. Let's bear in mind the whole thing had gone into graphic design at that point. Complete rewrite, complete re-graphic design, and the campaign went out about 3 weeks late, so you can imagine it did not have the impact that it needed to have. So that is just one of the reasons why we need to discuss some of the things that you should not do. So ladies, over to you. What do you think I could have done to avoid that? Who would like to start? Michelle, you look like you want to tell me off.
Well, I think if it's in terms of things to do, a way of not doing that is to get people involved way up front. So, really activating your stakeholders, making sure that people are bought in, that they're excited about it, and that way you can really, deliver your campaign plan to your CEO or your senior stakeholders as kind of a, fait accompli in many respects. People are excited about it, here's the budget. That is one surefire way of not having that problem. Robyn?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think everybody's probably got different things that they are looking for with campaigns. They'll have different KPIs and different performance indicators, that matter to them. For example, when you're speaking to a CMO, what they're looking for is probably going to be very different to what your CFO is looking for. I think for me, it's having those processes in place so you know what information to give those people to make sure that they're ticking off everything on their list as well. I think, we're all having our budgets stripped back and, pulled back as much as possible at the moment. So having to go cap in hand and going, actually, this is what I want to do and justifying it, but actually cutting, use the word fluff. I think a lot of as marketers, we know all the brand awareness stuff, all of this sort of stuff is really, powerful and impactful, but actually to a CFO, they'll go, brand awareness, actually, is that going to bring in leads or sales? So look at what is important to those individuals and actually how can you bring the information to them in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think it's really about knowing your audience. So, if you've got a CSO, is he a statistician or is he a creative at heart? And the way that you present that campaign you might want to go, if he's really a creative at heart, you might want to go heavy, talking about the tactics, sharing the beautiful artwork, because that's what's going to make his, or her blood race. But if it's more statistician, then you're going to want your KPIs, you're going to want the whole thing linked back to the overall business objectives and why it's important.
Yeah, and I also think as well, like given a benchmark of actually you guys were talking about this in your talk earlier, like what does good look like? And actually something that you can compare it to. So for example, what obviously I mentioned earlier, I offer kind of influencer strategy for B2B brands. A lot of, if you go to a CFO and go, actually, putting our employees into thought leadership positions, it's great for them to be seen as thought leaders. A CFO will probably look at that and be like, yeah, but I don't, fine, but like I can't put a number against that. So how do you go, right, actually, we pay X amount on paid media, and, that is expensive to us because per acquisition we're costing X, Y, Z, but actually, if we implement thought leadership and we turn our team into thought leaders, that's going to be something that's far more cost effective, and actually this is the comparable figure, and that is going to ring true with someone who's more finance related.
Yeah, I would say that's a great segue to then actually putting your campaign at the center of what else needs to happen to make that campaign successful. So, actually ensuring that the sales plan is in place, that they all know what they're doing, the product team understands what they're supposed to be doing, customer success is involved and understands what should be happening or what could be happening as a result of that campaign. So really it's making sure that, once again, marketing isn't seen as a silo, but rather as a core aspect of the centralized part of the business, I think is really key.
So we've covered a few of the do's of how to do things. What are some of the absolute no-nos when it comes to presenting your campaign or getting your campaign signed off?
So I think just try not to be overly, try to be concise, I think is probably the biggest thing for me. Like, these people are very time poor. They're not going to have time to read through decks and decks of information, as much as it is important to you to highlight, we're going to be doing this, and this is the backstory, and this is how I thought of it, and this is how it connects to everything else we're doing. All of that's great, but actually be succinct. What's important? What is it going to provide? And actually, ultimately, what's the outcome that you're going to get from it?
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell, that if you do those things, if you do those things, you'll get it signed off. If you don't do those things, someone's going to have a problem with it somewhere, right? So I think that's really the best way of looking at it. For me, it's always tying it back to the ICP. So who's the campaign for? What's it trying to achieve, as you said? And how do we know when it's successful or if it's successful? I think the other thing is making sure that you're presenting it in enough time so that what you said at the beginning doesn't happen. Marketers, we can run away with ourselves a little bit. I was in a talk earlier with Oreo, and we can run away with the really cool creative, with a really amazing idea of how we're going to do a really creative activation, for example, but we forget to take other people with us, or we forget to actually bring people to that party. So really engaging the wider stakeholder net group, it's key. If you don't do that, you will probably fail.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was just also going to add as well, like, I think another don't is just not getting discouraged if it doesn't go through. Like, the amount of times that you're like, not right now, And if it is a no, take that as not right now. It might not be the right timing. Might not be, and that's absolutely fine, because it means that you can plan even better. You can build it out. You can, connect it to future goals that your business has got in the future, and revisit it when it's a better time. So it's nothing personal. You just got to make sure that you take it back when the time's right.
And on the flip side of Robyn's positivity there, I would also say, do not do things for the sake of it. I know that's really easier said than done, but quite often as a marketer, you will get asked by someone more senior than you to just do something because that's what they want you to do. But you as a marketer, you are the one who has access to the data. You should understand your ICP. You understand what your audience actually wants. You probably know the language that your audience actually speaks. So if you are getting those kind of requests that are like, just do that, you need to try and find a way to push back. That's not easy. We talked about that in the last session. But if you have things like processes in place, you have consistent reporting, you have all those things, then you have a really good defense mechanism. So when you are asked to just do stuff, you don't do it, because those campaigns will not perform the way you want. Your ROI goes through the floor, and then guess what happens? Everyone blames marketing. Sorry to be negative.
At least you're on brand.
I mean, yeah.
I think one more thing to add. So when we're talking about bringing stakeholders in early, I think it's a great point. But just to add more detail, so one of the most common ways you're going to get your campaign axed is when nobody has seen it before it's finally getting signed off. So if you have a brief with your ICP, the theme you want to go after, something like, you know, how you are going to relate it back to what's happening in your business, and then you bring in, if it's your CEO or whoever it needs to be to collaborate on that, do that ideation stage with them first, because by the time you present your plan and you want the budget or whatever you want to do, they'll already know what's happening, and they would have been there with you when you're putting those things together, instead of you dumping something on their lap which they have no context for, because that's usually when they get that gut reaction of like, oh no, this is wrong, and then you kind of explain it to them and they get it. But you can totally prevent that by getting them in early and then doing your own thing in the middle, and then at the end they'll feel like they've been involved and they've known what's going on the whole time.
Yeah, I think as well, the final thing I'd say is if it's something new for your company, something that you haven't tried, very innovative, you might just want to maybe do a bit of a test and learn and actually see with a focus group, with some specific customers, actually how it lands. You know, if they don't understand what you're trying to achieve very, very quickly, and it's on something like out of home, or it's a digital campaign, for example, yeah, you're probably going to have to rethink. So do that well ahead of time if at all possible.
Yeah, I think as a standard rule, like I always like to use 10% of budget for experimentation. So I think that you've got then 90% of your budget or 50% of your budget on tried and tested channels that your foundation. You've got 40% on things that you've fairly new but that work well against everything else that you're doing, and then that 10% is your experiment as a minimum, because that's how you unlock new channels. That's how you try and you see and you prove what something that you've not tried before works well, and it'll impact everything else that you're doing. So, that 10% could have a 10% uplift on the other 90%, right? So I think that's always a good business case as well to put forward and say this is an experiment. We're going to be wrapping some tight KPIs around this to monitor the success of it. And we'll see how it affects all the other channels that are in our media mix. And then going forward, we can then decide if we want to reinvest inside of that.
I wonder, this is a bit of a leading question, but one of the things that I think stakeholders really struggle to understand when they don't have marketing experience is how long sometimes the impact of a campaign takes. So like the payback afterwards. So you launch a campaign, and you don't necessarily, if it's not a lead gen campaign, oh my God, imagine, they're not going to necessarily see an instant ROI or an instant kind of like, there's no instant gratification perhaps, apart from maybe people downloading something or liking something or whatever. So how would you guys handle that? How would you, in that scenario, communicate that to senior leaders where there isn't that instant payback with a campaign?
I mean, I've done it. It's not an easy conversation. I think for me, I always try to do the sort of 40-60 split of the long and the short. So longer term brand awareness, shorter term tactical. And I think it's just trying to be realistic and super transparent. These are things that are going to be very easy and very quick to measure, and we'll be able to see if it's a success or not. These aspects are actually going to take longer, but that's where your value is. That's where you're going to start to see, reduced costs in the long run if you can actually build your brand awareness, actually encourage people to come through rather than, spending money to consistently target them in a more tactical way. So for me, it's having that really honest conversation and educating a little bit as well. So this is the difference, this is why it's different, and this is why it's important that we do both.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think as well, I can only really speak kind of more in the B2B sense, but the sales cycles in B2B are ridiculously long. And I think, that brand awareness piece is really important for shortening those sales cycles. So actually, as opposed to, this is going to be the overall customer acquisition cost, what are those other things that are going to be affected? And, sales cycles is definitely one of them. And that could be profitability increase overall over a projected period of time for that business, right? So there's different KPIs that apply. Certainly, there's going to be. I mean, there's always kind of quick wins that you can have, as they call it. But I think for the the more strategic kind of brand building, it's the hardest sell, right? I think marketers always struggle to kind of pitch that in because it's not ultimately lead into immediate sales.
Absolutely. Are there any other do's or don'ts that maybe we haven't covered just yet?
I mean, I think we've covered quite a lot. For me, it's that transparency. It's about consistently keeping people in the loop with what we're doing, being very specific about why we're doing what we're doing and what we hope to achieve, celebrating the wins, understanding if we fail, and really getting more and more people in the planning process.
Yeah, and I absolutely, and just to kind of echo what I was saying earlier around as well, providing benchmarks. So going in with your business case to go, look, this is what we expect. This is actually what we're currently doing. If we're doing this is giving us X. If we switch to the strategy that I'm proposing, we're going to do this, and it's going to give us to Y. So it's actually costing us less over the longer term. It's going to give us more ROI. And then, that's a much easier case to put forward and have approval on. So, yeah.
Awesome. So we have time for some audience questions. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask Michelle or Robyn about getting campaigns signed off?
If you stick your hand up, I will know to come to you.
Anyone got any horror stories?
Oh.
Hi, sorry, we just joined quite last minute and just got the end of your conversation, but we're starting to think about planning for Black Friday that's coming up, and I don't know if you guys had any ideas or things for campaigns that we could push. We're a shoe brand called Lindsay Shoes, and we've been going for 30 years, so at the moment we're growing quite massively. The past 3 years we've tripled, which is amazing. But yeah, we're just coming up to Black Friday now and just wanted to hear if you guys had any ideas or experiences with Black Friday, that do's and don'ts and things like that. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Congratulations on the growth.
Thank you.
So I think the way I've always handled Black Friday, particularly, I'm assuming consumer-based, right?
Yeah, we've got
So
customers.
it's to see what everyone else is doing within that space. Because if you're just going to be offering, for example, I don't know, 5% discount, but everyone else is going to be doing a standard 10 or 15 on the day, you're going to be wiped out. So your advertising budget, just say goodbye. So it's really, I think, key to research what they've done previously and maybe kind of see. A lot of people will roll out Black Friday about a month before. They'll start talking about it. Some people will do it later, but in some areas they'll start a lot earlier, which will, if you need to be a little bit more, in the cold face, as it were, you could do the modelling of different variations of a discount beforehand, and then be ready with all the creative, see what people are doing, and then just go. But it's got to be profitable, right? So just make sure you do your financial modelling.
Okay.
Yeah, and I absolutely, and I only have a small amount of, I'm more B2B focused, but I've had a small amount of Black Friday experience when I've done B2C previously. But I think the biggest thing is just having that run-up plan. It sounds like you're already starting to think about it, which is perfect, but making sure that all of your channels align. So you've got strategic email blasts going out at different points to remind people what's coming, generate a bit of a buzz. Social media, is there anyone that you could be bringing in? Are there influencers that you could be working with to amplify everything else that you're doing across your other channels? All of this sort of stuff can really drive that buzz for everything else that you're working up to. But and then measurement is the biggest thing, because this is how you're going to optimize for next year, right?
Yeah.
So when have you launched? Could you have launched it at a different time? Again, exactly what Michelle was saying. What are the competitors are doing? So keep notes of that as well, because next year when you want to go back, it's always good to have that to look back on and know, okay, this is what we did, this is what they did. How can we go even one better?
Okay, yeah, that's really good, thanks.
And sorry, just finally, make sure you post-mortem. So, make sure you really analyse what you did and how it could have been changed.
Okay.
That's really the key, because that's what leadership are going to want to see. Like, if we'd activated for the entire weekend, rather than, are you going to just do Black Friday, or are you going to go all the way through to Cyber Monday?
Yeah.
So, what does that, again, what does the financial modelling look like? What are you trying to achieve? And is it, is it a brand awareness push, or are you trying to make money? I think that's a really cool thing.
Probably both at this point.
It always is.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with some questions? Yeah. I'm gonna go here first.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, all right. Okay, you guys were great. I just have a question that sometimes we want to do purpose-driven campaigns. How do we do it in a way that comes off as genuine rather than greenwashing? Because a lot of bigger brands as well have done a lot of purpose-driven campaigns and it hasn't really delivered in the right direction. So do you have any advice for that?
So the question was around how can you make sure if you're doing a purpose-driven campaign that it comes off as genuine, not greenwashing or virtue signalling. My answer to you is it's your customers. So I think people feel that something is authentic when you are actually using your customers, their voice, what they actually say about your product, what experiences they genuinely have. Whatever that content looks like is kind of up to you, whatever you guys can do within your budget and what space. But yeah, customers first. Make it's got to be real. If it's not real, it comes across as greenwashing and virtue signalling. And if you also as a company don't feel like you practice what you preach, it's also going to come across like that. So I feel like if you've got good examples of what the company actually does that kind of delivers on your purpose, again, equally fine, not virtue signalling. But if you are one of those awful people who puts your logo as the pride flag and you don't give a shit about people, then don't do that.
And also, I think as well, to your point, like, authenticity, I think, is this word that gets thrown around a lot. And actually, there's some people, I don't, what does that really mean? But I think it's really important because coming across as genuine, like we're all bombarded with marketing messaging, like all day, every day. So if something doesn't feel genuine, we get a gut feel straight away, right? So it has to come across that way. It has to come across as natural. Again, putting your customers at the center of that campaign is really important, but it also could be employee-generated content as well. So having them to show, but just be really genuine about it as well. Like, let them kind of come with their own voice, their own views, their own style of producing content. All of this sort of stuff works really well because on social media, I was actually talking about this earlier, but the biggest reason people open social media is because they're bored. They don't want, it's not because they're looking to learn about your business. It's not because they're looking to consume all of this thought leadership content. They're bored. And so they want inspiring, genuine content that they find interesting and that they want to watch. So employee generated content is also a huge part of that, I think. And that authenticity piece is actually really important.
I had a question over there somewhere.
We're running out of time. Quick one.
Hello. It's just in relation to brand awareness campaigns versus performance marketing. So in relation to campaign sign-off, I guess, how do you measure brand awareness campaigns and the success of them? And therefore, when pitching to senior leaders, what would you propose, if you were me, propose the KPIs of that to be in order to get budget away from performance marketing to grow the brand?
Okay, it's really tough. There's no silver bullet on that. I've done it in a couple of different ways. Probably the way that actually generated the most impact at a senior level was consideration. And actually, I surveyed people before using a survey software in particular parts of the UK, surveyed them before about their consideration for our brand, ran a campaign for X number of months, surveyed them consistently during that, to see where we were, if there was a local radio campaign happening, for example, did consideration go up or down in that area? As I said, there's so many different ways. Grab me afterwards if you want to have a bigger conversation, but it's hard. Just brand measurement generally is hard because it's the very long game.
Yeah, I think it's a tough sell, right? I think, is it in a B2B sense or a B2C?
Both.
Yeah. So I think for me, like I was saying earlier, the sales cycles in B2B are really long, and I think if you're building that brand awareness, you're building trust with buyers a lot earlier, right? And so for me, it shortens that sales cycle and you're cutting off as well. You're not going to get, you're kind of, I hate term funnel. I think we've moved on from that. But I think you're filling the funnel at the top with all your brand awareness. You cut that off, there's nothing coming in. People don't know about you, right? And how do you expect people to build trust with you if you're not running brand awareness campaigns and additional channels around that does, contribute towards it? So I think it's I think looking at actually what impact does that have on the sales cycle, for me, is always a bit of an important one as well. And attributing that activity. So that for me would be like one of the biggest KPIs to look at as well.
Thanks, everybody. We have got to wrap up now, but if you want to ask any more questions, grab Michelle and Robyn over at the confessions wall, just over there near the press office. We'll be around to answer more questions. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to join our free marketing community, you can scan the QR code. We are Blame It on Marketing. Please listen to our podcast on Spotify and YouTube. Thanks, bye.
Thank you.